Welcome to Soul Trek. This week's episode, Seasons Change and So Must I. Seasons change and so must I. I think that's a quote from the Guess Who. For some reason, when I hear those words in my head, I hear Burton Cummings' voice. In any event, it's from some song somewhere. I probably should have looked that up before I started this recording. Anyway, welcome to Soul Trek. I missed last week. It was such a busy week, but here we are trying it again this week. And I did want to talk about seasons, because it seems to me that every religion, all the major religions, and if you look at indigenous religions throughout the world, they all mark the seasons, they all mark the passing of time in a variety of ways. And it's wonderful that faith groups choose to do this, because I think there's something natural for us as human beings to mark the passing of time. I mean, it could be kind of a daily thing where you recognize that the sun's going down and coming up. Midday and midnight become times when I'm usually hungry, when I'm usually not, those sorts of things. And then we can start looking at how the moon cycles, and we can see that kind of every 24 days or so. There's a cycle, or 24, did I say 24? It should be 28 days or so, where the moon goes through its waxing and waning. And then we can even look at the years, as the days grow longer and then they grow shorter, and that sort of thing. The winter solstice is, I think, usually the 21st of December. That's when the days technically start to get longer, but it's imperceptible to most of us unless we're paying really good attention. By the 25th, we begin to notice that the days really are getting longer. You don't need to have any special instruments to notice that. And then by New Year's Day, it's really obvious. And so for many cultures, especially ones that observe the sun so closely, and in the Northern Hemisphere, we would naturally celebrate the New Year around that time of year. April Fool's Day, I think, comes from a tradition where there are some groups, indigenous groups throughout northern Europe, who would have celebrated the new year when they began to see buds on the trees and flowers growing and that sort of thing. And that would have been their time to celebrate New Year's. And, the Christians, whose traditions came from more southerly climes, made fun of them, called them fools for celebrating New Year's Day in April when it happened way back in January or whatever. So we mark the passing of time in a whole variety of ways. Sometimes historians like to criticize Christian traditions as sort of piggybacking, in fact stealing days away from other religious groups. And so, our Christmas Day is around a New Year's, so we're really just sort of stealing away from sun cultures that might have celebrated those days. I doubt very much, really, if that was principally on the minds of the early Christians. I rather suspect that the concern was more of convenience. I mean, to celebrate the Son of God, at the same time the sun is being celebrated, seems fairly logical. But we also have to remember that in the early church, a deliberate choice was made to celebrate the resurrection on Sunday, the first day of the week. So not on the Sabbath, not on the Saturday, but on the Sunday, when everybody else was going back to work, when it was sort of the most inconvenient time to do it. That was the day that the early church chose to use as its principal marker in the week to celebrate everything that Jesus Christ means to us. So to me, it seems unlikely that we would just kind of piggyback or try to steal special days away from other people. Today, often families will choose to celebrate somebody's birthday on a Sunday or a Saturday when more of the family might be available rather than on the Wednesday or whatever. And I suppose hundreds of years from now, anthropologists might look back on our time and think, well, those people were foolish. They thought everybody was born on a Sunday. Well, of course, we don't think everyone's born on a Sunday. It just happens to be a convenient day, the way that our world works, to mark those special occasions in people's lives. So I can't think of any culture in the world that doesn't mark the passing of time in one way or another. And so too the Christian tradition is to mark the day. Each Sunday has a special name and association with it. The season we've just started a couple of weeks ago, the new liturgical calendar, the church calendar, the season of Advent, the beginning of the Christian year, is celebrated. So we're in the season of Advent, and that'll flow out for a whole year, all these different Sundays and particular things that we remember throughout the year. I think there's something natural and good and life-giving for us to have these kinds of celebrations, to mark the passing of time by remembering various things. And I think that's kind of a cornerstone of our faith as well, of the Christian faith, is remembering. Come to think of it, that's probably true of every faith group. There are sacred things for all of us to remember, and we should encourage that in one another. And sometimes by this memory, and they're not necessarily my memories. I don't have any personal memory of the life of Jesus Christ, but I do have the stories of other people who witnessed that, and their memories have become our cultural memories as well. And all of that is designed to lift us up, to inspire us, to infuse the Holy Spirit in us, so that we can go about our lives, in a greater sense of awareness, in a greater sense of the love and mercy and forgiveness that God has for us, and the encouragement that God has for us to be loving and merciful and forgiving to one another. And that's probably at the core of the justice that God calls us to be loving and forgiving and merciful. And that's kind of the point of this journey that we're on, is to encourage this kind of faith in one another, this kind of world where we begin to look at things through the eyes of God, to look at things, to look at one another in terms of love and forgiveness and mercy. And when we begin to do that, perhaps some of the ills of the world, ignorance and prejudice, selfishness, pride, envy, those sorts of things might begin to disappear, and there'd be a greater sense of value for all people. I think that's the ultimate goal of our faith. That's the ultimate goal, I think, of most faiths. When it's not, then I would question that faith. And when it's not within Christianity, I think that there are really hard questions to ask there, and some really difficult realizations for us as well. I don't think we get off scot-free. I think we start here and now in our own lives and as a faith group to be the loving, forgiving, merciful people that God calls us to be the people of justice that God calls us to be. Thank you for tuning in today. God bless.